I knew something was wrong the moment I heard her laugh through the bedroom wall. 60 years old, and I'm standing in a beach house I paid for, listening to my daughter-in-law mock me. The Atlantic wind rattled the windows, but her voice cut through clear as glass. We're all couples, so we get the master bedroom, and my parents will have the guest room. Your mother is just a lonely old widow, so she can sleep on the floor. Josh said nothing. My son, the lawyer, the man I worked 3 jobs to put through college, said absolutely nothing. I stood there in the hallway, grocery bags cutting into my palms, and felt something crack inside me. Not my heart. That had been breaking slowly for years. This was different. This was the sound of my patience finally running out. The beach house rental had cost me $4,000 for the week. I'd booked it 6 months ago, wanting to do something special for my 60th birthday. Something nice, something that might bring my family together one last time before I admitted to myself what I'd known for years, that I'd lost my son to his ambition and his wife, Cindy Harris, fashion boutique owner, self-proclaimed success story. The woman who'd spent 5 years treating me like hired help at family dinners, who'd borrowed $15,000 from me to save her failing business and never once said thank you, who'd convinced Josh that his mother was an embarrassment from another era. I set the groceries down quietly and walked back outside to my car. My hands were shaking, but my mind was perfectly clear. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the ocean, watching the waves crash against the shore with a rhythm that felt like my own heartbeat. Lonely old widow. Sleep on the floor. The words played on repeat in my head. Not because they hurt. I'd heard worse from Cindy over the years. No, these words mattered because she'd said them in front of Josh, and he'd stayed silent. That silence was the final nail in a coffin I'd been building for myself for too long. I'd invited Josh 3 months ago. Just him. A quiet week at the beach for my birthday. A chance to reconnect. To remember when we used to talk about everything. He'd called back 2 days later, saying he couldn't come without Cindy, that it would look bad, that I was being unfair to exclude her. I'd given in. I always gave in. Then, a week before the trip, Josh called again. Cindy's parents wanted to come, and 2 of her friends. I'd said no, firmly, but he'd worn me down with the same arguments he used in court. It's already planned. They've made arrangements. It would be incredibly rude to uninvite them now. Don't you want people to celebrate with? What I'd wanted was 1 week with my son. What I got was Cindy's entourage and a comment about sleeping on the floor of my own rental. I pulled out my phone and opened the rental agreement. The house had 5 bedrooms, each designed with comfort and convenience in mind. The master suite, of course, boasted a stunning ocean view and a private balcony. There were 2 guest rooms equipped with queen-sized beds, offering a comfortable space for visitors. 2 smaller rooms, each with double beds, were tucked away in the quieter corners of the house. My plan had been simple. I'd take one of the smaller rooms for myself, offer Josh and Cindy the master suite, and leave the 2 guest rooms open for anyone else who might join us. But now, as I sat in my car with a cold, seething rage burning inside me, my plans were starting to shift. I'd spent 60 years of my life accommodating others, 60 long years of putting everyone else's needs and desires ahead of my own. When Josh's father passed away 8 years ago, I quietly mourned, not wanting to disturb my son during his first year at the law firm. When Cindy needed money for her boutique, I emptied my retirement savings because Josh said it was important for his marriage. And when they forgot my birthday last year, I brushed it off, assuring them it was no big deal, and that I understood how busy their lives had become. I understood a lot of things. I understood that Cindy saw me only as a source of financial support and as someone she could easily manipulate. I understood that Josh had turned into a person I barely recognized anymore. A man who prioritized status and appearances over the woman who had raised him on her own. I understood that if I didn't make a change now, I would spend the remaining years of my life as a punchline in my own family's jokes. The weight of that understanding no longer hurt me. Instead, it gave me clarity. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car, grabbing the grocery bags from the passenger seat. As I walked back inside, I could already hear Cindy's voice drifting from upstairs, engaged in one of her endless phone conversations. Josh was probably down in his office, glued to his work emails, like he always was. I methodically began unpacking the groceries. There were steaks for the grill, fresh vegetables, and that expensive wine Cindy liked to pretend she knew something about. I had also bought ingredients to make Josh's favorite birthday cake, an old recipe he'd loved when he was younger, before his taste buds became more refined. Just last week, my friend Anne had asked me if I was looking forward to the celebration. I had lied and told her that I was, but Anne knew me far too well. She'd studied me across her kitchen table, her gaze filled with understanding. "Martha," she'd said gently, "you don't have to keep doing this to yourself." At the time, I had told her I didn't quite understand what she meant, but as I stood in the kitchen now, arranging steaks in the refrigerator, the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. I pulled out my phone and sent Anne a message. "Remember what you said about standing up for myself? I'm ready." Her response came almost immediately. "About damn time. What do you need?" A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. It felt strange, almost foreign, as though I had forgotten how to smile. "Everything you know about Cindy's business, and I mean everything." The 3 dots appeared on the screen, and then, "Oh, honey, this is going to be fun." Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? I didn't see Josh and Cindy again until dinner time. I'd spent the entire afternoon in my assigned bedroom, the smallest one at the far end of the hall, with a window that overlooked the parking lot instead of the ocean. I hadn't fought Josh when he showed me where I'd be sleeping. I simply smiled and told him it was perfect. His visible relief told me everything I needed to know. He had probably been expecting an argument. At 6 o'clock, I could hear them gathering in the living room. Cindy's voice carried easily through the house, that high-pitched, performative tone she always adopted when she wanted attention. I took a moment to check myself in the mirror. My grey hair was neatly pulled back, and I wore a simple blue dress. My only accessory was my wedding ring. I looked exactly like what I was, a 60-year-old woman who had spent her entire life working hard, only to be left with a son who had forgotten where he came from. When I came downstairs, they were scattered around the living room like characters in a magazine spread. Josh and Cindy sat on the main couch, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. Cindy's parents, Robert and Linda, had claimed the armchairs by the window. The 2 friends, whose names I couldn't even remember, were perched on bar stools at the kitchen counter. "There she is," Cindy announced, her voice far too loud, as if my arrival in my own rental was some grand surprise. "We were just talking about dinner. I was thinking we could do something casual tonight and save the big celebration for tomorrow." I nodded. "I brought steaks. I can grill." "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do that," Josh said, already glancing at his phone again. "We can just order something." "I want to," I said simply. Cindy exchanged a quick, barely perceptible look with her mother. It was the kind of look that said, "See? This is exactly what I've been telling you." She can't help herself. I'd seen that look before, 2 years ago at Thanksgiving, when I insisted on bringing my green bean casserole, even though Cindy said she had the vegetables covered. Last year, on Josh's birthday, when I gave him a framed photo of us from his college graduation, and Cindy gave him a Rolex, the look spoke volumes. She's pathetic, out of touch, trying too hard to matter. "Well, if you insist," Linda said with a warm, practiced smile. "That's very sweet of you, Martha." Robert nodded in agreement. A home-cooked meal sounds perfect. I could see the surprise on their faces. Cindy had probably told them I was difficult, demanding, old-fashioned in the worst ways. Instead, they were meeting a woman who seemed perfectly pleasant and eager to please. Good. Let them think that. I went to the kitchen and started preparing the meal. Josh didn't offer to help. He never did anymore. Cindy wandered over after a few minutes, wine glass in hand, and leaned against the counter. "So, Mom," she said, and I hated how she called me that. Like we were close. "I was thinking we could do a little photo shoot tomorrow. For my Instagram. The beach house is absolutely gorgeous, and my followers would love it." "Of course," I said, seasoning the steaks. "Great. I'll tag the rental company too. Good exposure for them." She took a sip of wine. "You know, this place must have cost a fortune. How did you afford it?" The question was casual, but the implication was clear. How could someone like me afford something like this? "I saved up," I said. She swirled her wine. "Well, it's beautiful, really beautiful. My parents are thrilled. They never get to do things like this." "Because you can't afford to take them," I thought. "Because your boutique is barely breaking even, and the only reason you're not bankrupt is because of my $15,000. But I just smiled and said, "I'm glad they're enjoying it." Cindy drifted back to the living room, and I finished preparing dinner alone. Through the window above the sink, I could see the sun starting to set over the ocean. It was beautiful. I'd wanted to watch it from the master bedroom's balcony, with a cup of tea and a good book, taking a moment to acknowledge 60 years of survival. Instead, I'd spent the evening watching them enjoy the dinner I made, for people who thought I should sleep on the floor of my own vacation house. The steaks turned out perfectly, seared to just the right degree of tenderness. I paired them with roasted vegetables and garlic bread, then set the table with the good china I'd brought from home, making it feel a bit more like a special occasion. Everyone gathered around, complimenting the meal, and for a few fleeting moments, it almost felt like a family dinner. Almost. Then, Cindy's phone rang. "Oh, I have to take this," she said, jumping up from the table. "It's about the boutique." She disappeared out onto the deck, and I could hear her voice through the screen door, bright and artificially professional. When she returned 5 minutes later, she was practically glowing. "That was a potential investor," she announced with obvious excitement. "Someone who saw my Instagram and wants to discuss expanding. Can you believe it?" "That's wonderful, honey," Linda said, beaming with pride. Josh squeezed Cindy's hand. "I told you the social media strategy would pay off." I cut into my steak and said nothing. "Martha, you should see Cindy's boutique," Robert said, clearly impressed. "It's really something. She's built it from nothing." "From nothing." "Well, from my $15,000. But sure." "I'm proud of her," I said, forcing sincerity into my voice. Based on Robert's approving smile, I must have pulled it off. After dinner, I excused myself and went back to my room. I could hear them downstairs, laughing and chatting, the sounds of a family gathering I wasn't really a part of. I sat on the edge of my bed and pulled out my phone. Anne had sent me a long message, accompanied by 3 PDF files. "Okay," her message began. "Here's what I've got. Document 1 is Cindy's business registration and tax filings. My friend at the county office got it for me. Document 2 is her loan application from 2 years ago, showing that she was rejected by 3 different banks before coming to you. Document 3 is the most interesting, her Instagram analytics. Turns out she buys followers and engagement. Her successful businesswoman image is about as real as her Gucci purse. And yes, I checked, it's fake." I opened the first document. Cindy had registered her business 6 years ago with an initial investment of $8,000. According to the tax filings, her profits had never exceeded $30,000 in a single year. Last year, she'd barely broken even. The loan application was painful to read. She'd applied for $20,000 from 3 different banks, all of which had turned her down, citing poor credit history and lack of revenue. The dates on the applications were only 2 months before she'd asked me for a small loan to expand inventory. $15,000, which I had given her because Josh said it was important, because he made it sound like she was on the verge of something big, because I wanted to support my son's marriage. I had never asked for it back. Cindy had never offered. The Instagram analytics made me laugh, though the sound that escaped my lips was bitter. 80% of Cindy's followers were bots. Her engagement rate was less than 1%. Every comment section was full of spam accounts and fake enthusiasm. Anne had done her homework. I could have kissed her. I quickly texted her back, "You're a miracle worker. How did you get all this?" "I've been collecting it for 2 years," she replied. "Ever since Thanksgiving, when she treated you like garbage in front of everyone. I knew someday you'd need it." 2 years. My best friend had been quietly building a case against my daughter-in-law for 2 years, waiting for me to be ready to use it. I heard footsteps in the hallway, and I quickly locked my phone. There was a knock on my door. "Come in," I called. Josh opened the door and leaned against the frame. He looked tired, older than his 34 years, and the lines around his eyes revealed how hard the law firm was working him. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "You okay? You left pretty quickly after dinner." "Just tired," I said, my voice low. "Long day." He nodded but didn't step into the room. We stood there in uncomfortable silence, and I found myself wondering when things had changed between us. When had my son and I become strangers who didn't know how to have a normal conversation anymore? "The dinner was great," he finally said, breaking the silence. "Thank you for doing all of this. I know it's expensive." "It's my birthday," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I wanted to." "Still, it's generous." He looked back toward the stairs where I could hear Cindy laughing at something. "Cindy's parents are really grateful. They don't get many vacations." "And whose fault is that?" I wanted to ask. "Your wife's failing business that she pretends is thriving?" But I just smiled. "I'm glad they're here." He looked relieved, like he'd expected an argument. "Okay, well, get some rest. Big day tomorrow." He started to leave, then paused. "Mom, I know Cindy can be a lot sometimes, but she means well. She's just stressed about the business." "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood that my son had been fooled, or had fooled himself, or simply didn't want to see the truth. I understood that he'd chosen his wife over his mother, which was natural and right, except that his wife was a liar and a manipulator who saw me as nothing but a resource to be used. I understood everything now. After he left, I opened my phone again and started making notes. I had 3 days before the big birthday dinner I'd planned for Saturday night. 3 days to set everything up perfectly. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about something more important: dignity. I'd spent my whole life being accommodating, being understanding, being the bigger person. I'd let people walk over me because I'd been taught that good women don't make waves, that good mothers sacrifice everything, that good people turn the other cheek. But there comes a point where turning the other cheek just means you get hit twice. I pulled out a notebook and started writing. Step 1. Let Cindy think she's won. Let her enjoy her victory, her master bedroom with the ocean view, her role as the successful daughter-in-law with the embarrassing mother-in-law. Step 2. Create discomfort. Nothing obvious, nothing she could point to and say I was being vindictive. Just small things, subtle things. Step 3. Plant seeds of doubt. Let other people start asking questions. Let Cindy have to defend herself, justify herself, explain herself. Step 4. Present the evidence. Quietly, calmly, without drama. Just facts. Step 5. Watch it all fall apart. I looked at my list and felt that strange smile again. I'd been a doormat for so long that everyone had forgotten I had a spine. They were about to be reminded. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30. Old habits from years of working multiple jobs. Outside my parking lot view window, the sky was just starting to lighten. I got dressed and went downstairs. The house was quiet, everyone still asleep. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the ocean I couldn't see from my bedroom. Then I got to work. The thermostat for the house was in the hallway. I turned it down 3 degrees. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to make the night slightly uncomfortable. Then I went upstairs to the master bedroom, where Josh and Cindy were still sleeping, and quietly adjusted the vent in their room, closing it partially. Back downstairs, I moved furniture around in the living room. Small changes. The coffee table shifted 6 inches closer to the couch. A lamp repositioned. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make the space feel slightly off, slightly cramped. In the kitchen, I rearranged the cabinets, putting things in places that almost made sense but not quite. Sugar where the salt should be. Glasses in the wrong cabinet. Small frustrations waiting to happen throughout the day. I heard movement upstairs around 7. Cindy's voice, complaining about something. Josh's lower murmur in response. By the time they came downstairs, I had breakfast ready. Pancakes, bacon, fresh fruit. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee, reading a book. "Morning," Josh said, heading straight for the coffee maker. He opened the cabinet where I used to keep the mugs. Empty. He looked confused. Opened the next cabinet. Also wrong. "Third one to the right," I said without looking up. He found the mugs and poured coffee for himself and Cindy. She appeared a moment later, wrapped in an expensive silk robe, her hair perfect despite just waking up. "It was freezing last night," she announced. "I could barely sleep." "Really?" I looked up from my book. "I was comfortable. Maybe it's the room." Josh frowned. "I was cold too, actually. What's the thermostat set at?" 68, I said. "Same as yesterday." Which was true. I'd just changed it this morning. Cindy sat down at the table and pulled out her phone. "I need to post something. My followers expect daily content." She started taking pictures of her breakfast, the ocean view behind her, herself in various poses of casual elegance. Robert and Linda came down half an hour later, followed by Cindy's friends. Everyone gathered for breakfast, and I played the perfect hostess, making sure everyone had enough to eat, refilling coffee, asking about their plans for the day. "I thought we could do that photo shoot this morning," Cindy said. "The light is perfect." "Of course," I said. "Whatever you need." We spent 2 hours on the beach while Cindy posed for pictures. Her friends took hundreds of shots while she changed outfits, adjusted her hair, perfected her smile. Josh stood off to the side, checking his phone. Robert and Linda sat on beach chairs, looking proud of their daughter. I sat nearby and watched, and I thought about those Instagram analytics. 80% fake followers. Bought engagement. This beautiful, elaborate performance for an audience that didn't really exist. When we got back to the house, Cindy's parents wanted to take a walk into town. Cindy said she needed to edit her photos. Josh said he had a conference call. I said I'd start preparing for tomorrow's birthday dinner. As soon as everyone dispersed, I pulled out my phone and texted Anne. "Ready for phase 2? Can you come up tomorrow morning?" "Wouldn't miss it," she replied. Then I texted Alex Martinez, an old friend of Josh's from law school. He'd reached out to me 6 months ago, concerned about Josh, saying he seemed different lately. We'd met for coffee, and he'd shared his worries about Cindy's influence. I'd brushed it off at the time, not ready to admit what I was seeing. Now I typed, "Remember when you said if I ever needed anything? I need a favor." His response was immediate. "Name it." "Tomorrow night at the beach house. Bring your wife. I'm having a birthday dinner and I'd like you to be there." A pause, then, "Josh doesn't know, does he?" "Not yet. Will you come?" "Absolutely." I smiled. The pieces were falling into place. That afternoon, while Cindy was upstairs editing her photos and Josh was on his call, Linda found me in the kitchen. "Martha, can I help with anything?" I looked up from the vegetables I was chopping. "Oh, you're a guest. You should be relaxing." "I'd like to help," she insisted, moving closer. "You've done so much for everyone. Let me at least keep you company." I handed her a cutting board and some carrots. We worked in silence for a few minutes, and I could feel her watching me, trying to figure out what to say. Finally, she spoke. "I have to admit, Martha, you're not quite what I expected." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "Cindy had given me the impression that you were—" She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "That I was what?" Linda set down her knife. "She made it sound like you were demanding, overbearing, always needing attention and help." She looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have believed her without meeting you first." I kept chopping. "What made you change your mind? You gave up the master bedroom without a word. You've been cooking and cleaning for all of us. You haven't asked for anything." She paused. "Meanwhile, Cindy has the best room in the house, the one with the private balcony and the ocean view, and she complained about it being too cold." I didn't respond, just kept preparing the vegetables. Sometimes silence was the best response. "Can I ask you something?" Linda said quietly. "Did you help Cindy with her business? Financially?" Here it was. The first real question. I looked at her directly. "Why do you ask?" "Because she told us she did it all herself, that she built the boutique from nothing, no help from anyone. She's very proud of that fact," Linda continued, her voice careful, probing. "Robert and I tried to help her 2 years ago, and she turned us down, said she didn't need it because she had investors, but I've never heard her mention any investors." "Maybe you should ask her about that," I suggested gently, keeping my tone neutral. Linda studied me for a moment, her eyes searching mine. "You did help her, didn't you?" she asked softly, her voice edged with a quiet vulnerability. I paused, then set down my knife and met her gaze. "Linda, I'm not going to speak badly about your daughter," I said, the words coming out calm and deliberate. "But I do think there are some questions worth asking. About her business, about her success, about where the money came from when she needed it." Linda nodded slowly, digesting the words. "She was desperate 2 years ago. She called me crying, saying the boutique was going to close if she couldn't make rent and restock inventory. Then, suddenly, everything was fine. She never said how." "Like I said," I repeated, my voice steady, "worth asking about." We worked in silence for a few more moments, preparing the vegetables. When Linda left the kitchen, I noticed her approach Robert, whispering something to him. He glanced in my direction, then at the stairs where Cindy was still locked away in her room. The seeds had been planted. That evening, we had a more casual dinner on the deck. I had prepared pasta and salad, and everyone seemed to relax into the evening. The wine flowed freely, and Cindy, in her element, entertained us all with tales of difficult customers and her thoughts on the latest fashion trends. "You know what I love most about the boutique?" she said, a glass of wine in hand, gesturing expansively with her free hand. "I built it myself, every single piece of it. No investors, no partners, no help, just me and my vision." I caught a glance exchanged between Linda and Robert. "That must have been expensive," Robert said carefully, his tone measured. "Starting a business from scratch." Cindy waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, it was challenging. But you find ways. You get creative with financing." "What kind of financing?" Linda asked, pressing, a hint of skepticism in her voice. "Mum, it's boring business stuff," Cindy said with a laugh, trying to brush the question aside. "Let's not talk about work." But Linda didn't let it go. "I'm just curious. You were in such dire straits 2 years ago, and then suddenly everything was fine. How did you turn it around?" Cindy's smile tightened, and her voice took on a sharper edge. "I told you. I got creative. I found solutions." "What solutions?" Linda pressed again. "Mom." Cindy's tone had grown more clipped. "Can we not do this right now?" Josh, sensing the tension, quickly jumped in. "Hey, how about we play some cards? I brought a deck." The conversation was swiftly redirected, but the damage had been done. Linda was looking at her daughter with new eyes, a layer of doubt creeping into her expression. Cindy, too, could feel the shift. She excused herself shortly after, claiming she had a headache, and went upstairs. Josh followed her a few minutes later, probably to try and smooth things over, But I stayed on the deck with Cindy's parents and their friends. I made small talk about the weather and the beach, but I could feel the subtle change in the air. Questions were being asked now. Suspicion was settling in. Later that night, I heard raised voices coming from the master bedroom. The walls were thinner than they thought. "Your mother is turning my parents against me," Cindy hissed, her voice low but sharp. "She hasn't said anything," Josh replied, his voice defensive. "She doesn't have to. She just stands there, being all humble and accommodating, making me look bad." "Maybe you're being paranoid." "Don't you dare take her side," Cindy snapped. Their voices dropped too low for me to hear more, but it didn't matter. The cracks were beginning to show. The tension was palpable, and I knew this was only the beginning. Anne arrived the next morning at 9, pulling up in her old Honda with a big smile on her face. I met her at the door, and she pulled me into a hug. "Ready to watch some fireworks?" she whispered. "Almost," I whispered back. I introduced Anne to everyone as my oldest friend, in town for my birthday dinner. Cindy eyed her suspiciously, but Josh seemed pleased that someone from my life had come to celebrate with me. "Anne, this is my son Josh, and his wife Cindy," I said. Anne shook their hands warmly. "I've heard so much about you both. Congratulations on the boutique, Cindy. Martha told me all about your success." Cindy preened. "Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but so rewarding." "I bet. Running your own business is no joke." Anne smiled innocently. "What's it called? I'll look it up. I'm always looking for new fashion finds." "Cindy's Collection," Cindy said. "I'm on Instagram." "Perfect. I'll follow you right now." Anne pulled out her phone, and I saw the moment she found the account, saw the moment she saw the bought followers and fake engagement, but her face stayed friendly and impressed. "Wow, 30,000 followers. That's amazing." Cindy glowed. She didn't know that Anne knew exactly how hollow those numbers were. Alex Martinez and his wife Rachel arrived around noon. Josh was surprised and clearly uncomfortable. He'd been avoiding Alex since the wedding, probably because Alex had been honest about his concerns regarding Cindy. "Alex," Josh said, shaking his hand stiffly. "I didn't know you were coming." "Your mother invited us," Alex said easily. "We wouldn't miss her birthday." Josh looked at me, confused. I just smiled. "I wanted some of my friends here too," I said. "You don't mind, do you?" What could he say? No? "Of course not," he managed. Cindy looked furious. The guest list was expanding and she wasn't in control of it. I spent the afternoon cooking. The birthday dinner was going to be elaborate. Prime rib, roasted potatoes, green beans, salad, and a chocolate cake. Anne helped me in the kitchen, and we talked quietly while we worked. "Everyone's here," Anne said. "All the witnesses you need." "Almost everyone," I corrected. I pulled out my phone and made a call. A woman's voice answered. "Hello? Mrs. Patterson, this is Martha Harris. We spoke last week." "Oh, yes, Martha. Did you decide about the investment opportunity?" Mrs. Patterson was the potential investor who'd called Cindy yesterday, except she wasn't really an investor. She was Anne's sister-in-law, an actress who'd agreed to make a phone call and play a role. "Actually," I said, "I was hoping you could come by this evening. For dinner. I'd like to discuss it in person." "What time?" 7 o'clock. "I'll be there." I hung up and looked at Anne. "Now everyone's here." She grinned. "You're terrifying when you want to be." The afternoon passed slowly. I could feel the tension building, like the air before a thunderstorm. Cindy kept disappearing to her room, coming down only to snap at Josh or complain about something. Her parents were quiet, watching everything with careful eyes. Josh looked stressed, caught between his mother and his wife, not understanding what was happening, but sensing that something was wrong. At 6 o'clock, I started setting the table. I used my good china, the set my mother had given me, the one I'd held on to through years of moving and poverty. I used cloth napkins and the silverware I'd been married with. I put candles on the table and fresh flowers in a vase. It looked beautiful. Cindy came downstairs at 6:30, dressed in a designer dress that I knew cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd done her makeup perfectly, her hair in an elaborate updo. "Wow," she said, looking at the table. "You really went all out." "It's my 60th birthday," I said simply. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Right, of course." Everyone gathered in the living room for drinks before dinner. Cindy held court, telling stories and laughing loudly. She was performing again, playing the successful businesswoman, the beloved daughter-in-law. At 7 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mrs. Patterson, dressed professionally, carrying a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Patterson," I said loudly enough for everyone to hear, ensuring the tension in the room was palpable. "Thank you so much for coming." Cindy's head whipped around, her eyes wide with surprise. "What? You're here?" she exclaimed. Mrs. Patterson looked confused. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" she asked, clearly puzzled. "You called me yesterday," Cindy said, standing up abruptly, "about investing in my boutique." Mrs. Patterson frowned. "I don't think so. I'm here to speak with Martha about a business opportunity." The room fell utterly silent. "But you called me," Cindy insisted, her voice rising. "You said you saw my Instagram and wanted to discuss expanding." "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Mrs. Patterson said calmly, her voice unbothered. "I've never heard of your Instagram." I watched Cindy's face shift from confusion to horror, and then to raw anger. Her gaze darted toward me, and I saw the moment she understood what had happened. "You," she breathed, her voice low and venomous. "You set this up." "I don't know what you mean," I said, keeping my voice calm and collected. "Mrs. Patterson is here to discuss an investment opportunity with me for my small business." "You don't have a business," Cindy snapped. "I do, actually," I replied smoothly. "I started a consulting firm last year, small business financial advising." I turned to Mrs. Patterson with a smile. "Please, come in. Let me introduce you to everyone." The dinner that followed was awkward, to say the least. Cindy was seething, barely touching her food. Josh kept darting his eyes between his mother and wife, confused and trying to understand what was happening. Everyone else seemed on edge, sensing the rising tension, but not fully understanding its cause. Mrs. Patterson played her part perfectly, asking me questions about my consulting business. She nodded thoughtfully at my responses, making notes in her portfolio, as though she was considering investing in my hypothetical venture. To everyone else, it looked like a legitimate business meeting unfolding during a birthday dinner. "So, Martha," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice polite but probing, "you mentioned you have experience helping small businesses secure financing." "I do," I replied, my tone steady. "In fact, I've helped several local businesses over the years." Cindy's fork clattered against her plate, the sound sharp and discordant. "Can we not talk about this now? It's supposed to be a celebration." "Oh, I don't mind," I said, smiling with feigned sweetness. "It's my birthday. I can talk about whatever I like." Linda spoke up, her voice warm but surprised. "Martha, I didn't know you had a consulting business. That's wonderful." "I started it after I retired from my regular jobs," I explained, keeping my voice steady. I realized I had a lot of knowledge about managing money on a tight budget, about making difficult financial decisions, about knowing when an investment is worth it and when it's not. "That sounds valuable," Robert said thoughtfully. "Have you worked with many clients?" "A few," I said, taking a sip of wine. "Though not all of them have been honest about needing help." I let the words hang in the air. Some people would rather pretend they're successful on their own than admit they needed assistance. Cindy went very pale, her lips pressing into a thin line. Josh cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Mum, what are you doing?" "I'm having a conversation," I said, raising an eyebrow. "Is that not allowed at my birthday dinner?" Alex, ever the troublemaker, spoke up. "Martha, can I ask you something? When you help these businesses, do you expect to be paid back?" "That depends on whether they presented it as a loan or a gift," I replied. "If someone tells me they're borrowing money, I expect it back. If they tell me it's an investment in their success, I expect at least an acknowledgement of my contribution. And if they do neither, Alex pressed, if they just take the money and pretend it never happened, then I suppose that says something about their character, doesn't it? I said, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Cindy stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. I need some air. She stormed out onto the deck, Josh following her immediately. Through the glass doors, we could see them arguing, Cindy gesturing wildly, Josh attempting to calm her down. Linda looked at me, her eyes filled with sadness and understanding. Martha, did you give Cindy money for her boutique? I set my fork down carefully, my fingers gripping the edge of the plate. I gave my son's wife $15,000 2 years ago, I said, my voice calm and even. She said she needed it to expand inventory and make rent. She said it was temporary, just until a big shipment came in. That shipment never materialized, and the money was never mentioned again. 15,000, Robert repeated, his voice low and quiet, as though the number itself carried weight. I liquidated part of my retirement savings, I continued, my tone unwavering. Because Josh asked me to. Because he said it was important for their future. Anne, who had been silently watching, reached over and squeezed my hand in silent support. Mrs. Patterson, clearly uncomfortable, shifted in her seat. Perhaps I should go, she suggested, her discomfort palpable. No, I said firmly, shaking my head. Please stay. I'd like everyone to hear this. I've been quiet for too long. Josh and Cindy came back inside a few minutes later. Cindy's eyes were red, her makeup smudged from the tears she'd undoubtedly shed. Josh looked shell-shocked, as though the weight of the situation was suddenly crashing down on him. Mom, Josh started, his voice pleading. Cindy says you're trying to humiliate her. I'm telling the truth, I said, my voice firm. Is the truth humiliating? Because if it is, maybe the problem isn't me telling it. You gave me that money as a gift, Cindy said, her voice shaking, but full of anger. You said it was to help us. I said it was to help Josh, I corrected her, my eyes never leaving hers. And I said you could pay me back when the business stabilized. That's not how I remember it. Then maybe your memory is as selective as your Instagram analytics, Anne said sweetly, a smile playing at her lips. Cindy whipped her head toward Anne. Excuse me. Anne pulled out her phone with a smug smile. 80% of your followers are bots. You buy engagement. Your successful boutique barely breaks even according to your tax filings. You were denied loans by 3 different banks before Martha gave you money, and you've been lying about being self-made ever since. The room went completely silent, the weight of Anne's words sinking in. How dare you, Cindy whispered, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. How dare I? Anne stood up, unflinching. How dare you treat my best friend like garbage after she saved your failing business? How dare you tell your parents she's a burden when she's the only reason you still have a boutique? Linda's voice was barely audible as she whispered, Cindy, is this true? Mom, she's lying. She's trying to turn you against me, Cindy protested, but there was no conviction in her voice now. The documents are public record, Anne said. I can show you business registration, tax filings, loan applications, all of it. Rachel, Alex's wife, spoke up quietly. I looked up your boutique earlier, Cindy. The reviews are mixed at best. A lot of people complaining about overpriced items and poor customer service. You people are ganging up on me, Cindy said, her voice rising. This is insane. Josh, do something. Josh looked at me. Mom, why are you doing this? The question broke something inside me. Why am I doing this? I stood up slowly. I'm doing this because 3 days ago, I overheard your wife tell you that I should sleep on the floor of the beach house I paid for. I'm doing this because she's treated me like hired help for 5 years. I'm doing this because she took $15,000 of my retirement money and never said thank you. I'm doing this because you, my son, the man I worked 3 jobs to put through college, stood there and said nothing when she called me a lonely old widow who didn't deserve a bedroom. Josh's face went white. You heard that? Every word. I was going to say something, he whispered. I was. But you didn't. You haven't said anything for years, while she's belittled me and used me and convinced you I'm an embarrassment. Tears were running down Josh's face now. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't want sorry. I want my son back. I want the Josh who used to care about people instead of status. I want the man who would never have let someone talk about his mother like that, let alone married someone who does it regularly. Cindy let out a harsh laugh, one filled with disdain. Oh, this is rich. Poor Martha the martyr. You know what your problem is? You can't let go. You can't accept that Josh has his own life now. You're right, I said, my voice calm but unwavering. I do need to let go. I need to let go of the fantasy that I have a daughter-in-law who respects me. I need to let go of the hope that my son will remember where he came from. I need to let go of the belief that being kind and accommodating will make people treat me better. I turned to Linda and Robert, my gaze steady. Your daughter asked to borrow $15,000 from me. I gave it to her because my son asked me to, because I believed in their future. She spent it on inventory that never sold and rent she wouldn't have needed if she had managed her business properly. She has never acknowledged this. She told you she built everything herself, that she's a self-made success. That's a lie. Martha, Linda said, her voice trembling as tears filled her eyes. We had no idea. Of course you didn't, I replied, my tone still steady. Because Cindy is very good at controlling the narrative. She's very good at making herself look good and making everyone else look bad. I turned back to Cindy. But the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Cindy's hands were shaking with rage now, her face flushed. You think you're so clever, don't you? Setting up this whole thing, inviting these people, timing everything perfectly. What do you want, Martha? An apology? Your money back? What? I want my dignity, I said quietly, my voice just above a whisper. That's all I've ever wanted, to be treated like a person who matters. You want dignity? Cindy scoffed, her laugh manic and wild. You're 60 years old and you're still trying to compete with me for Josh's attention. That's not dignity. That's pathetic. Josh grabbed her arm, desperation in his eyes. Cindy, stop. No. She yanked her arm away from him, her eyes wild with anger. I'm not going to stop. I'm tired of tiptoeing around her feelings. She gave us money, so what? That doesn't give her the right to control our lives. Us? I said, my voice thick with disbelief. You mean you. I gave you money. Money that was supposed to be for my retirement, for my future. Money I'll probably never see again because your boutique is failing and you're too proud to admit it. My boutique is not failing, Cindy snapped, her voice rising. Show them the tax returns, Anne said, pulling papers from her bag and holding them up for all to see. Show them the profit and loss statements. Show them the truth. Cindy lunged for the papers, but Anne held them out of her reach. Mrs. Patterson, clearly startled by the growing confrontation, stood up, looking alarmed. Perhaps I really should leave, Mrs. Patterson said, her discomfort clear. Yes, I said firmly. You should. Thank you for coming. She quickly gathered her things and left, her exit marking the end of the performance I no longer needed. Linda was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. Cindy, just tell us the truth. Did Martha give you money or not? Fine, Cindy shouted, her voice filled with bitter frustration. Yes, she gave me money. Are you happy now? The perfect Martha saved my business. Why didn't you tell us? Robert asked, his voice soft but hurt. Because I knew you'd react like this. I knew you'd think I was a failure. Cindy spat, her voice trembling. We wouldn't have thought that, Linda said, her voice filled with confusion. We would have helped you. I didn't want your help, Cindy snapped, the words sharp. I wanted to prove I could do it myself. By using my money and pretending it was yours, I asked, my voice quiet but steady. Cindy turned on me with pure venom in her eyes. You know what? Yes, I used your money. And you know why you gave it to me. Because you're desperate. You're desperate to be needed, desperate to be important, desperate to matter to someone. You threw money at me because it was the only way you knew how to stay relevant in Josh's life. Her words cut deep, and there was a kernel of truth in them. I felt the sting, but I refused to let it break me. Maybe you're right, I said, my voice steady. Maybe I was desperate, but that doesn't excuse what you did. It doesn't excuse the lies, the manipulation, the cruelty. Cruelty? Cindy's voice was rising, her tone shrill with indignation. You want to talk about cruelty? You invited me here knowing you were going to humiliate me in front of my parents and friends. You set this up, all of it. You're right, I said, my voice calm, almost soothing. I did. The admission seemed to shock everyone, even Josh. But I did it because I spent 60 years being walked over, being used, being treated like I didn't matter. And I finally realized that being quiet and accommodating wasn't making people respect me. It was making them think they could treat me however they wanted without consequences. I turned to Josh, my heart breaking. Your father and I struggled to give you a good life. We went without so you could have. After he died, I worked myself to exhaustion to make sure you could finish law school without debt, and I never asked for anything in return except basic respect. Mom, Josh's voice broke, his eyes filled with tears. I do respect you. Do you? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Because respecting someone means standing up for them. It means not letting your wife call them a lonely old widow. It means not asking them to give up their retirement savings without ever checking if that money was paid back. It means not treating them like they're an obligation instead of a person. Cindy grabbed her purse from the back of her chair, her movements sharp and agitated. I don't have to listen to this. No, you don't, I agreed, my tone firm. You can leave any time you want. But your parents deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know that their daughter has been lying to them for years about her business, about her success, about everything. I'm leaving, Cindy said, her voice bitter. Josh, let's go. Josh didn't move. Josh! Cindy's voice was sharp, almost pleading. We're leaving. Now. No, Josh said quietly, his voice raw with emotion. Everyone stared at him in stunned silence. What? Cindy demanded, her voice rising. I said no, Josh repeated, his voice shaking as he looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You're right about everything. Josh, don't do this, Cindy warned, her voice frantic. But Josh wasn't listening anymore. He was looking at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the little boy I had raised, the one who used to tell me everything, the one who used to believe I hung the moon. I heard what she said about you sleeping on the floor, Josh admitted, his voice breaking. I heard it, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to fight with her. I've been avoiding fights with her for years, and I've let her treat you terribly because it was easier than standing up to her. Josh, stop it, Cindy hissed, trying to cut him off. She did take your money and never pay it back. I knew that. I told myself it was fine, that you offered it as a gift, but I knew you expected to be repaid, and I never pushed her to pay you back because I didn't want the conflict. This is ridiculous, Cindy said, but her voice was shaking now. She was unraveling. I've watched her belittle you at every family gathering. I've watched her cut you out of conversations, dismiss your opinions, treat you like you're stupid or old-fashioned. And I said nothing because I was a coward. If you're done with your confession, Cindy said icily, we're leaving. Tonight. I'm not staying here another minute. Josh shook his head slowly. You can leave if you want, but I'm staying. The room was so quiet I could hear the ocean through the closed windows. What did you just say? Cindy's voice was dangerously low. I'm staying. It's my mother's birthday, and I've been a terrible son. I'm not leaving. Cindy stared at him, her face going through a series of expressions, shock, rage, disbelief. If you stay here, we're done. You understand that? We're done. Maybe we should be, Josh said, and his voice was steady now. Maybe we've been done for a while, and I was too afraid to admit it. "You heartless jerk," Cindy muttered. "Cindy," Linda stood up, her voice firm. "That's enough." "Don't you start," Cindy whirled on her mother. "You're taking her side too." "There are no sides, honey. There's just the truth. And the truth is you took money from Martha and never told us. You lied about building your business alone. You've been disrespectful to Josh's mother for years." "I cannot believe this," Cindy said. "My own parents." "We love you," Robert said quietly. "But we didn't raise you to treat people like this. We didn't raise you to be cruel." "Cruel?" Cindy's laugh was harsh and broken. "I'm cruel. She orchestrated this entire thing. She set me up." "You set yourself up," Anne said. "Martha just gave you enough rope to hang yourself with." Cindy's face was red now, splotchy with anger and tears. "This is insane. You're all insane." She grabbed her phone from the table and threw it at the wall. It shattered, pieces of glass and plastic scattering across the floor. "Cindy!" Josh reached for her, but she shoved him away. "Don't touch me." She picked up her wine glass and threw it as well. It struck the wall next to the phone, red wine splattering across the white paint in a chaotic spray. "Stop it!" Linda moved toward her daughter, but Cindy wasn't stopping. She grabbed a plate from the table and smashed it on the floor. Then another, and another. The beautiful china I'd set out so carefully, the plates that had been my mother's, shattering into pieces. "You want to ruin me," Cindy screamed. "Fine, I'll ruin everything." She swept her arm across the table, sending dishes crashing to the floor. Food, glasses, silverware, all of it tumbling down in a cacophony of breaking and clanging. Josh tried to grab her arms, but she fought him off, scratching at his face, screaming incoherently. She was completely out of control. Her carefully constructed image shattered along with the dishes. "I gave up everything for you," she screamed at Josh. "I could have married someone better, someone richer, someone who wasn't tied to his pathetic mother." She grabbed the centerpiece, the vase of flowers I'd arranged that morning, and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and exploded, water and flowers and glass everywhere. Robert and Alex tried to help Josh restrain her, but she was wild, thrashing and screaming, grabbing anything she could reach and throwing it. "You're all against me, every single one of you." She broke free and ran to the kitchen, grabbing plates from the counter and hurling them at the walls. The sound was deafening, plate after plate smashing, her screams echoing through the house. "Cindy, please!" Linda was crying. "Stop this!" But Cindy couldn't stop, or wouldn't. She grabbed the birthday cake I'd spent hours making, the chocolate cake that had been Josh's favorite when he was young, and she threw it. It hit the wall and slid down, leaving a brown smear across the white paint. "There's your precious birthday," she shrieked at me. "There's your dignity." She was panting now, mascara running down her face, her dress splattered with food and wine. She looked around at the destruction she'd caused, at the horrified faces watching her, and something seemed to break inside her. "I'm done," she said, her voice suddenly flat. "I'm done with all of you." She turned and ran up the stairs. We could hear her in the master bedroom, throwing things around, slamming drawers. Josh started to follow her, but I caught his arm. "Let her go," I said quietly. "Mum, she's going to hurt herself." "No, she's not. She's going to pack her things and leave. And you're going to let her." He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I've ruined everything." "No, sweetheart. You've finally seen things clearly." Cindy came back down 10 minutes later, dragging a suitcase. Her face was still blotchy, her eyes wild. She looked at each of us in turn, her lip curling in disgust. "You're all pathetic," she said. "Especially you, Martha. Congratulations. You got your revenge. I hope it was worth it." "It wasn't about revenge," I said. "It was about respect." "Respect?" Cindy laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "You'll never have my respect. You're just a sad old woman who couldn't accept that her son grew up." She looked at Josh one last time. "When you realize what a mistake you've made, don't bother calling me." Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her so hard the windows rattled. We stood in the destroyed dining room, surrounded by broken dishes and splattered food, and listened to her car start up and tear out of the driveway. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then Linda started crying. Robert put his arm around her, looking devastated. Josh just stared at the door, his face blank with shock. Anne came over and hugged me tightly. "Happy birthday," she whispered. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all, the destruction, the drama, the sheer over-the-top catastrophe of the evening. I laughed until tears ran down my face. Josh looked at me like I was crazy. "Mom? I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm sorry, it's just... Look at this place. Look what she did." "This isn't funny," Josh said, but there was a hint of something in his voice, something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "It kind of is," Rachel said quietly. "I mean, she threw a literal tantrum, like a toddler." Alex snorted, trying to hold back a laugh. Then Anne started giggling, then Rachel. Soon we were all laughing, even Linda and Robert, even Josh. We laughed at the absurdity of it, at the mess, at the pure theatrical madness of Cindy's meltdown. When the laughter finally died down, we looked around at the disaster. "Well," Anne said, "at least we know who she really is now." We cleaned up in silence. Josh worked mechanically, picking up pieces of broken plates, wiping wine off the walls. His hands were shaking. Linda and Robert helped, both of them looking shell-shocked. The friends Cindy had brought had left quietly during the chaos, probably grateful to escape. When the worst of the mess was cleared, I made coffee. We sat in the living room, exhausted, and nobody knew what to say. Finally, Josh spoke. "Mom, I don't even know how to apologize for this." "Then don't," I said. "Not yet. First, you need to figure out what you're actually sorry for." He looked at me, confused. "Are you sorry that Cindy destroyed my birthday dinner? Or are you sorry that you let things get this bad in the first place?" Josh's face crumpled. "Both, all of it. I'm sorry for everything." "I need you to understand something," I said carefully. "This wasn't about punishing you. This was about refusing to accept being treated like I don't matter." "You do matter," Josh said desperately. "You've always mattered." "Then why did you let her talk about me like that? Why did you stand by while she used me?" "Because I was weak. Because I wanted my marriage to work so badly that I ignored all the problems. Because somewhere along the way I forgot who I was." Robert cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Josh, we had no idea Cindy was treating Martha this way. If we'd known..." "It's not your fault," I told him. "Cindy's very good at showing different faces to different people." Linda wiped her eyes. "Martha, I'm so sorry. About the money, about everything. We'll pay you back, however long it takes." "That's between you and Cindy," I said, "but I appreciate the offer." We sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee, processing everything that had happened. Anne eventually stood up. "I should head out. Let you all talk." I walked her to the door. She hugged me tight. "You did it," she whispered. "You stood up for yourself." "I feel terrible," I admitted. "Good. That means you're human, but you shouldn't feel guilty. She made her choices." After Anne left, Alex and Rachel said their goodbyes too. Linda and Robert retreated to their guest room, both of them looking drained. That left just Josh and me, sitting in the living room, listening to the ocean outside. "I'm going to divorce her," Josh said finally. "Is that what you want? Or is that what you think I want?" "It's what I want. It's what I should have wanted a long time ago." He looked at me. "I didn't marry the person I thought I did. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to see it." "What about your career, your life together?" "What about it? I've been miserable, Mum. I've been pretending everything was fine while my marriage fell apart and I turned into someone I don't recognize. Someone who lets his wife disrespect his mother. Someone who values appearances over integrity." He started crying again, and I moved to sit next to him, putting my arm around his shoulders like I used to when he was small. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry for all of it. For not standing up for you, for asking you to give us money, for letting her treat you like garbage, for forgetting everything you sacrificed for me." "I know," I said softly. "I know you are. Can you forgive me?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "Eventually," I said. "But Josh, you need to understand something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to how things were. You've hurt me deeply, and that's going to take time to heal." "I'll do anything," he said, "whatever it takes. Then start by being honest. With yourself, with me, with everyone. No more pretending things are fine when they're not. No more choosing comfort over truth." He nodded, wiping his face. "I'll pay you back, every cent Cindy took. It might take a while, but I will." "I don't care about the money anymore," I said, and I realized it was true. "I care about having my son back, the real one, not the version of you that got lost somewhere along the way."